So today I wanted to do a mixed media piece. I'm showing you my outline here and then some color swatches. This was my inspiration on Pinterest. I'm using very light pale watercolors here, so very washed out, more diluted than I normally would because I want to build this up in layers with mixed media. Right now I'm just doing some of my kind of Cosmo type flowers. I'm using a smaller filbert brush for this. And I believe I'm using some permanent rose. So I'm just laying in a few of these flowers here. And I just used the Pinterest picture for inspiration. I changed the layout some, and I kept most of the colors. I just made some of them a little bit punchier. I'm adding in some sort of peony type flowers. I'm going to be touching in another one right here. And again, normally I would be adding more pigment to this, but I want to go in with more details with gouache. So I'm going to hold off on doing too much detail. Here I'm adding in some blue flowers. These sort of look like lupin. There's other flowers that this reminds me of, but I'm just doing some soft brush strokes here, just pressing my brush to the page. Adding in a few more. I'm variegating the color a little bit. Some are a little darker, some are more washed out with a little bit more water, letting things kind of blend a little bit. Here's a few of the darker ones that I was talking about. And just touching those in. Adding a few more over here. This area needs a little bit more darkness to kind of balance the other side. So I'm adding that in. There was a few spots that were still damp here, so I'm doing a little bit of wet on wet with just a little bit of extra color. Just touching that in with one of my little detail brushes. Okay, so now I'm going in and I'm doing my white cosmos. So I'm doing one in the center here. This one's very straight on. This one up at the top is a little bit more angled. And this is white with just a touch of indigo and a touch of burnt sienna, so it makes it almost like a light gray. And then here I'm adding in some little tiny daisies or chamomile flowers. There's a lot of different ones this could be. It's just getting the feel for some little dainty flowers. Touching some in on the other side here. These are really fun to do. It's just very small brush strokes on your page, nothing fancy. I'm adding in a few others here, and then for the center I'm using a little bit of yellow deep with some yellow gray, and I'm just touching that into the center of all of them. Some of the flowers are a little bit more angled than others. Adding in a few more centers. I'm also adding that in for my Cosmo flowers, and then I'm touching in a few dots of that on the peony type flowers as well. So I'm just going to add that in here. Okay, that looks good. So now I'm just taking some sap green and I add a little bit of yellow deep to that for the stems. This helps my green tie in. I wanted something bright and punchy and poppy for spring. I'll be adding some contrasting leaves here in just a little bit with a darker green. I'm going to take that sap green with some yellow and some purulene green, and I'm going to make some contrasting leaves, but I won't be doing that for a bit. Just adding in a few more strokes here. I'm not a big fan of when I have floating flowers, so you'll see me touch in even just some extra stems because I like to make sure everything's connected on my florals. That's not everybody's style. That's just kind of the way that I've come to like to do my watercolor painting. So I'm just touching in a few more stems here with that same green. It adds a nice brightness, keeps the vibe of this very spring and fresh. Here I'm touching in some white with a little bit of that blue. I used white gouache with all of my watercolor paints for this. The only time I'm using straight gouache is I used a little bit of magenta Winsor Newton designer gouache at the very end on those pink florals because they needed to pop out a little bit more. But otherwise, all the rest of this, I'm using white gouache with the same watercolor paint that I used on the florals or the stems or whatnot. So I'm I'm just touching that in here. And on the lighter flowers, I'm using a little bit of a deeper blue with that white gouache. On the darker flowers, I'm using more white gouache and less blue color to help them pop a little bit more and to add some dimension, design, give some extra shape to the flowers. It's a great way if you end up with blobby flowers to add some more detail by using some gouache paint on top of it. And it's really fun to do mixed media. Kind of makes you feel like a kid again. You're playing with your art supplies and just getting creative. Okay, so I'm just continuing to touch in that color here. I think that looks good. It's pretty balanced. Adding a few extra strokes here and there. Touching that one up just a little bit. Just a little bit more touch up. Sometimes I don't know when to stop and I want to just keep adding details. And I guess that's a big recommendation I have is that if you feel like it's missing something, step back for a second. And then if you want to add more details in, you can. But it's harder to take them away. So just be conscious of when you're adding details to your piece. Okay, so now I'm adding in some of my pink. Again, I use the same pink that I used for the flowers. I just added some white gouache to it to make it more opaque. I'm kind of just sketchy outlining these flowers. Nothing super fancy. Again, we're going to add so many layers on this that, if one doesn't look quite how you want it to, let it dry, add another layer of something else. I'm going to be doing all of these pink flowers and the same thing with the white flowers with sort of a gray color along with some straight white gouache on those florals. But I'm also going to be going in with a fineliner pen and outlining a lot of these details and flowers and leaves and things to give it a little bit of pop and to give it a little bit of a more kind of detailed, sketchy look. I love doing that with my watercolor paints, figuring out which medium I can add to it to make it pop. It's pretty rare that I'll make a watercolor painting and just leave it alone. I really can't help myself. I love doing fine liner pens. I like oil pastels, watercolor pencils, crayons, acrylic markers, gouache, white gouache and colored gouache. I just have so many things that I love playing with my supplies. So I'm just going in here and I'm touching up some of those daisy flowers, just adding some white details and a little bit of shadow where I feel like I need it. Again, this isn't my final detail phase, so some of this doesn't look exactly how I want it to. So I'm just playing with it till I get it figured out the way that I want it. Okay, that looks nice. I like how the centers are looking. Just adding a little bit more to make them a little bit punchier and brighter. And a little bit more detail over here. Okay, so here's where I'm going in with my darker green. This is sap green with some deep yellow and purline green. It just needed some contrast to kind of bring everything out. So you'll see me touch in some darker stems here. And then I'm going to start adding some darker leaves where I want a little bit of my florals kind of brought forward and draw more attention to them. So you can see I'm touching some in here, just adding them kind of haphazardly, sort of strokes and blobs with my brush. Nothing too big. I want to keep the dainty feel of this. I don't want to overwhelm it with a lot of big leaves. I want this bouquet to look like, we literally walked out to the garden and just kind of picked random things. It wasn't super curated, but you would see cosmos growing with peonies, growing with these fluffy blue flowers. It looks like a nice wildflower bouquet. Here I'm going in with my Fineliner pen. This is a permanent Fineliner pen. I have permanent ones, and then I also have just regular Fineliner markers that I use over top of my painting and different art things that I create. But these are the permanent ones. I believe I was using a 05 for this, I think. 05 or maybe it's an 03. Anyway, it's just a black Fineliner pen. I use a lot of the Pigma Micron pens. For my non-permanent ones, I have some Towtree markers. My husband actually got me off Amazon a number of years ago. They've served me very well. The colors are really nice. Again, they're not permanent, but they can add some really fun tonal detail to your artwork. And I'm just doing some scribbly lines around these petals, adding some veins and details to these florals. Okay, that is looking really good. I'm just touching in some more here. Okay, here's where I decided I wanted some more magenta details on this. So I'm taking some magenta from Winsor & Newton. This is designer gouache, and I'm touching that in on those pink florals. And this is just going to add that finishing pop that I'm looking for. I really liked how it turned out. You could definitely see it kind of laying on the surface of those pink flowers, but I think it looks really beautiful and just added a whole nother layer and extra element to this. I kept it a little bit waterier, so it's not a thick, heavy layer. It's a little bit more translucent. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. I'm still working on getting my filming organized, being able to do it horizontally, and just getting my setup dialed. So I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for being here.